The animal-based brain is the motor function center of the physical body. It is the control of this animal-based brain for usage by the incarnating soul that is of vital importance. The animal-based brain is a physical organ by which genes are passed from physical evolution. These genes are as thought pictures passed from the parents. Genes from the higher planes were inseminated into the physical animal forms populating the earth. This caused a mutation of the animal kingdom, and the ones who received these genes split off. These genes were injected into the animals that the spacemen took on board their ships to accomplish this. The insemination experiments went on until the animal's digestive system was changed and the tail had disappeared. All of this was done so that the entities who were doing the experiments could then enter the bodies and experience the Earth plane. They had done this on other planets in the universe. Every time they find a planet capable of life or already having some sort of life forms, they need to investigate that planet for the Creator God. It is the only way he can know what his total creation is like. Once they inhabited the bodies of the new human, they found that the animal brain that had developed was very strong and stubborn and that they could not control the animal form. Therefore, they pulled back up out of them until more generations of experiments were done to soften and refine the brain of the animal form so they could infiltrate it with their thoughts. The first brain was a single glob of matter that registered outside stimuli when a pattern was repeated. Any action that was not repeated again and again did not register. It was simply a musculature conditioning to outside activity, outward physical actions. These, of course, included walking, running, eating, elimination of waste, procreation, and all of the basic body functions. When an action such as picking up a rock and throwing it was not repeated for a long period of time, say several weeks or a month, the next time it was performed was like a brand new experience as far as the brain was concerned. It had no memory of the previous try and was a totally new performance. If the action were repeated every day for several days in a row, the muscle content of the brain would register this new twitching or flexing and loosen up the tight constriction of the cells that were photographing this action. It then would become a learned action and an easier task to perform from that point on. As the next generation was born, the flexibility of the brain cells was more prominent due to the use of the one giving the genes. The change in cells of the brain of the parents caused the genes that were passed on to their offspring to be more advanced. It is very important that this be understood. Herein lies the answers to some of humanity's puzzling questions of genealogy. A man could father one child and 3 years later father another who was directly influenced either for good or for bad by what that father did in the 3-year period between fathering the two children. The mother also has this ability to pass on changed genes between offspring. As a matter of fact, she has slightly more influence than the father because the matter for the form is drawn from her cells. In the beginning, the whole of the animal-based brain was used just to keep the body alive, not just by eating, but also for the functions of the lungs, kidneys, liver, heart, and so on, all the organs necessary for the life of the form. These first levels of mind power of the human have moved out. These were the controls that allowed the body to function on automatic pilot. These body functions are partly instinct left over from the animal forefathers and partly inherited genes passed on from the parents from the time of the insemination of genes from the higher planets. The organs are now capable of sustaining life without requiring the absolute focus of the animal-based brain. From this point on, the experiments continued with the offspring that were born after the spacemen inhabited the forms. These offspring had a different brain construction due to the work that the experimenters' inhabitation of the forms had done. You see, they used their influence on the animal brain of the body they were inhabiting to form thought patterns or pictures of an even more gentle brain, a more pliable brain. These experiments and the experiments of nutrition that were done along with them are the starter recorded passages in the Bible. The experiment has never ended. When the experiments were done, this particular gene, you might call it, was passed to the offspring of the animals. As long as the experiments continued, this gene was being enhanced ever more with each generation. But when it got to the point where the new race of humans were left on their own to see what would develop, this gene did not progress until new experiments were begun. The experiments ahead of that changed the animal form into that which would become the human. The early experiments set the stage, or, if you will, restructured the animal form into one with the capability of moving past the animals. Then, as given, they were left on their own for several generations to see what would develop without any more help. It was determined that progress was very slow when no new genes were brought into the race and the experiments were begun again. It was at this time that the brain was restructured, at the time of the destruction of Atlantis. It was softened by means of changing the atomic structure that the human forms consisted of. This softening then allowed for expansion of the universe of the brain. Those doing the experimentation were trying to achieve their goal, that of raising the intelligence, and, as an aftermath of that, the raising of the consciousness, which would soon follow. This was necessary for the survival of the race of humans that they had invested so much time and energy in. I'd like to use an analogy of building a house to help with the understanding of the stages of progress the brain needs to go through. But first I need to give an explanation describing the new way of thinking about the brain. This is that the human brain is not only divided into the right side and the left side, it is actually divided into 4 parts. Actually, there is a double growth process, the exoteric outer physical expression and the esoteric inner spiritual expression. Because of this double growth track, we have the brain separated into the left and right sides. The left deals with physical growth, our exoteric outer life, and the right side deals with our spiritual growth, our esoteric inner life. Now we need to divide the right and left sides in half, giving us 4 parts to the brain. There is a lower left side, a lower right, an upper left, and an upper right. Each of these divisions has 3 levels, with each level having 12 stages. The lower left division, sections 1, 2, and 3, deals with our physical bodies. The lower right, 4, 5, and 6, are emotional bodies. The upper left, 7, 8, and 9, are mental bodies, and the upper right, 10, 11, and 12, are spiritual bodies. This gives us 12 levels or dimensions of the human mind. Most of humanity is functioning on the 3rd level. The connecting that is done in the first section, 1, 2, and 3, is done as instinct. The connecting from the next section, 4, 5, and 6, is accomplished by the use of the intuition. The connecting from the 3rd section, 7, 8, and 9, comes as flashes of insight, or genius. And the connecting from the 4th section, 10, 11, and 12, is as inspiration, divine inspiration. This is the structure of the brain, and the path of progress should be from lower left brain to lower right brain, then upper left and upper right, with the apex of the mind where your inner being will be located. There are 3 major stages of synthesization or blending that will occur over time as a child grows. These 3 stages of synthesization are the first stage, which takes place at mind dimension 6, the second stage at mind dimension 9, and the 3rd stage at mind dimension 12. Let's compare this process with building a house. The first section of the mind, dimensions 1, 2, and 3, the physical body section. Work is done here on the forming of the personality. A beginning stage of blending takes place when the half of the soul in the incarnation begins having some influence on the animal-based brain in the process of forming a personality. Actually, the forming of the personality is completed at mind dimension 3. At this stage, the half of the soul in incarnation gains control over the physical body, a soul-infused personality. Building our house, the first section of the brain. The animal-based brain is responsible for all body functions. It also provides the vehicle for the seed core, the storehouse of treasures that the incarnating entity brings with him. This animal-based brain provides the canvas for the picture the soul wishes to paint. Perhaps you could picture it as the bare ground where you went to build a house. This thought has all the utilities in place, such as the water, the sewer, the gas, and electric, compared to body functions, so you can begin to build your house with these tools already established. The incarnating soul digs the basement and stores his goods there, traits he brought into this incarnation with him, until the first floor of the house is laid. Then he can begin shaping up that first floor into rooms and decorating it with his choice of carpet and paint. This would compare to the age of 4 and the forming of a new personality. The second section of the mind, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, the emotional body section. When you have moved through the 12th level of mind dimension 3, you graduate into the second section consisting of mind dimensions 4, 5, and 6. This is the emotional body section, and work is begun on merging the soul-infused personality with the half of soul on the inner planes. This takes place once the individual evolves to level 6. It is only at this point that the individual can receive direct guidance from the half of the soul left on the inner planes. It also seems that emotion can't be assisted with or controlled by the inner plane soul until this synthesization takes place. When this takes place, you graduate to the third section. Building our house, the second section of the brain, the first stage of synthesization. The incarnating soul eventually finds just one floor too confining and begins building the second story. This would be when he returns to the basement and brings up the goods he stored there to furnish the second story of his home. When the first story was completed, he was so wrapped up in furnishing it with new items and decorating it the way he wanted that he more or less forgot about the stuff he had stored in the basement. Now, when building the second story, he realizes that he has much in the basement that needs to be looked at and either utilized in his house or discarded. Perhaps there is a perfectly good television down there, but it is small and the picture somewhat fuzzy. He goes through a battle with himself over whether to use his TV or not. He tries to decide whether to keep it because the person who gave it to him means a lot to him and he is sentimental over it, or to discard it in favor of a newer, more enlightened model of TV. A newer TV would have a sharper picture, more channels available, better color, and a remote control. He goes through this battle with almost everything he had stored in the basement, either keeping it or discarding it. What a job this is. No wonder he didn't want to do this when he was building and furnishing the first story of his home. When he gets through this process, he finds he is able to use the whole house now, including the basement that was previously stacked with boxes. This gives him a very complete home and a very complete feeling. Most people are content to spend the rest of their life in this home. This relates to the first stage of synthesization, that of the soul-infused personality, the soul and incarnation being blended with the personality. The third section of the mind, dimensions 7, 8, and 9, the mental body section. Your graduation from the second section at mind dimension 6 leads you to the third section, mind dimensions 7, 8, and 9. You work in this area, attempting to communicate with the other half of your soul that you blended with at level 6, and the thoughts of your seed core, which is a collection of the wisdom and knowledge of all those in your spiritual family tree. This leads you to complete connection with your personal guidance system at level 9, the second stage of synthesization. Building our house, the third section of the brain, the second stage of synthesization. Some people aren't content with the house at this stage. They feel they need to have even more room to expand. They believe they would like to add a third story to their house, to house their interests, a place where they could pursue the subjects that fascinate them, such as photography or making stained glass or learning all there is to know about a certain country or pursuing philosophical interests. They need to have a library where they can do research and a communication system to be in touch with others interested in the same subjects. They build the third story and feel very satisfied and complete. This relates to the second stage of synthesization, that of contact with the half of your soul on the inner planes. The fourth section of the mind, dimensions 10, 11, and 12, the spiritual body section. When the connection is made at the 12th level of mind dimension 9, then the soul on the inner planes enlists the help of a master teacher along with their seed core as the move is made into the fourth section, levels 10, 11, and 12. Level 10 is a scientific section. Level 11 is focused on spiritual truths, and level 12 is connection with the total mind of the Creator. The third level of synthesization occurs when all aspects of the half of the soul in incarnation and the half of the soul not in incarnation merge with the overshadowing spirit and attain the ability to be in communication with the mind of the Creator. This takes place at level 12 when you reach the apex of your mind. This is the final icing on the cake, if you will, after the synthesization or blending of the other parts has taken place. This means that the total creative channel has been built, the third stage of synthesization. Building our house, the fourth section of the brain, the third stage is synthesization. At this time, the incarnating soul usually focuses in on one certain subject and realizes they need to have a laboratory. They want to pursue the experiments they wish to make to further the knowledge for humanity about a certain subject, so they build a fourth story. They finally finish their home with a very substantial roof on the top, one that is glass, so they can see out the top of their house and watch the stars and the moon and the sun. Without this glass roof, they would feel too confined. This is the third stage of synthesization, that of connecting with the apex of your mind, your God within. This is being one with God, the goal of every incarnating soul.